Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Late autumn pressed into the frontier town with a steady chill that had settled weeks ago and never lifted. A thin layer of dust slid across the main road whenever the wind kicked up, brushing against storefronts with cracked windows and faded signs. People moved quickly between buildings to stay ahead of the cold, their coats pulled tight and their hats lowered to shield their faces. Horses tied outside the saloon shifted in place, lifting their hooves restlessly as if feeling the same unease that hung over the street. Naya stepped into this space with slow, uncertain movements, trying to stay close to the edges of the road where fewer eyes would fall on her. Her breath came out thin and shaky, not from the cold alone, but from the exhaustion in her bones. Her deerskin clothing, decorated once with bright beads and tassels, hung torn and uneven. Several beads were missing, threads snapped, and the skirt was frayed from traveling through brush, dirt, and unfriendly towns. Her arms, bruised and scraped, stayed tucked close to her body as if she expected someone to reach for her at any moment. Her mind kept circling the same thought: just pass through. Do not stop. Do not look at anyone. The last town she entered left her chased out with curses thrown at her back. She hoped this place would be different, though she had no real reason to expect kindness. She made it several steps before a young boy near the blacksmith shop noticed her. His eyes widened, and he pointed at her with a mix of curiosity and fear. "Pa, look," he shouted. Naya froze. The sound tightened something deep in her chest. She didn't turn toward him, but she felt the shift of attention as people nearby followed the boy's stare. Her legs felt unsteady. She forced herself to keep moving, head lowered. "Hey, you," an older man barked. The harsh tone struck her like a physical blow. She stopped again, breath catching. Her hands twitched, unsure where to go or what to do. She tried stepping back, but the livery's wall was behind her. Within seconds, two more men approached. Their expressions tightened when they saw her clearly. Her clothing, her skin, the fear she couldn't hide. "What's she doing here?" one muttered. "She's trouble," another said, louder. Naya lifted her hands slightly, palms open, a silent attempt to show she meant no harm. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had learned not to run. Running made people angrier. Standing still sometimes kept them from escalating. But today it didn't help. A voice from behind the group muttered, "Monster!" Another echoed it. The word cut through her, sharp and familiar. Her stomach turned. She had heard it in other towns, heard it whispered by frightened settlers who didn't care what she had lost before they called her dangerous. The first stone came suddenly. It struck her leg with a dull, heavy impact, and she staggered, gasping. She steadied herself with one hand against the wall. Pain flared through her calf, but she bit it back, not wanting to show weakness. Showing weakness often made things worse. A second stone hit her shoulder, pushing her sideways. The crowd grew louder, fueled by each other's fear and anger. Naya lifted both arms to shield her face. Her breath shook. She tried to look for a path out, a narrow space where she could slip through. But their bodies blocked every direction. Her thoughts scrambled. Stay standing. Don't fall. If you fall, they won't stop. Another stone flew past her ear, close enough for her to feel the air shift. Someone shouted for her to get out of town. Someone else told them to finish what they started. Her chest tightened, and her vision blurred at the edges. She felt trapped, cornered, unable to speak a single word that might calm them because she knew it wouldn't matter. Her voice had never changed anything before. A new sound cut through the noise, steady footsteps on packed dirt. The crowd hesitated, parting slightly as a quiet figure stepped through. Cole Harrow walked with slow, measured strides, his dark coat swaying faintly with each step. His hat cast a shadow across his brow, but his expression was clear, tired, wary, carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many bad decisions made by desperate people. He had been on his way home from a supply run, planning to reach his cabin before the light faded. He didn't want trouble. He avoided trouble whenever he could. But when he saw the woman pressed against the livery wall, her arms raised, her body shaking from pain and fear, something inside him tightened. He didn't know her. He didn't know what she had done or what had brought her here. All he saw was a person being hurt while she stood defenseless. The memory of times he had stood by and regretted it later pulled at him in a way he could not ignore. He walked straight into the circle. No shouting, no threat, just the kind of presence that made men step back on instinct alone. "That's enough," Cole said, his voice low but firm. The tone alone broke the rhythm of the crowd. Several men lowered their stones. A few muttered but backed away. Cole didn't look at them. He stepped between Naya and the next person who might have thrown something, positioning himself so she was fully behind him. Naya's breath caught again, but this time from disbelief. She didn't understand why he stood there. No one had done that for her before. Her legs trembled harder. She swayed slightly. Cole glanced back at her, seeing the exhaustion, the pain, the panic that held her frozen. His jaw tightened. He didn't want to involve himself further. But leaving her here meant something would happen he didn't want to witness. He crouched and lifted her into his arms, careful not to force her injuries. She gasped softly, surprised by the gentleness. Her instinct told her to pull away, but she couldn't. Her body lacked the strength, and his hold was steady, not rough, not threatening. The crowd watched, confused and unsettled. Cole began walking away, carrying her without another word. When someone called after him, "You can't just take her." He didn't turn around. He kept walking until the shouts faded behind them, until the last building fell away and only open land stretched ahead. Each step took them farther from the pain she had grown used to, though she didn't allow herself to believe she was safe. Not yet. Her thoughts churned. Why is he helping me? Where is he taking me? What does he want? But exhaustion pulled her deeper into his arms, and the steady rhythm of his walk kept her from falling apart. Cole didn't look down at her again. He just kept his pace, jaw set, mind turning over the choice he had made. He didn't know if it was wise. He didn't know what would come next. He only knew he couldn't leave her there, and that decision would change both of their lives for good. The sun had nearly disappeared by the time Cole reached the edge of his land. The cold deepened quickly in the open fields, the kind that crept through clothing and numbed hands if a person stood still too long. His cabin came into view as a small, sturdy shape against the fading light, smoke rising from the chimney in a thin, uneven line. He kept one arm firm beneath Naya's legs and the other braced around her shoulders, adjusting his hold whenever her breathing changed or her weight shifted. She tried once to speak, a faint sound in her throat, but fear tightened her voice before any words formed. Cole didn't press her. He only lifted her a little higher and continued forward, boots crunching softly over the packed dirt path that wound up to his front steps. When he reached the porch, he pushed the door open with his shoulder, letting the warm air spill out. The stove inside had kept burning from the morning, its soft red glow spreading through the small single-room space. He stepped in and eased the door shut behind him, careful not to let the latch snap loudly. Naya's eyes moved around the cabin with quick, frightened glances. The room was simple. One bed near the back wall, a small table with two chairs, tools hung neatly near the door, shelves stacked with folded blankets, jars, and repair tools. Everything looked used but cared for. No clutter, no sign of anyone else living there. Just him. Cole lowered her onto the bed with slow, measured movements. The moment her back touched the blanket, she tensed, arms instinctively drawn toward her chest. She didn't push him away, but she didn't relax either. Her breath came shallow and fast. Her mind raced through possibilities. Is he going to lock the door? Is she trapped? Did she just trade one danger for another? Cole stepped back immediately, a full pace, then another. He didn't touch her again. He didn't even reach for the blanket beside her. He kept his hands visible and his posture open, shoulders lowered, showing he meant no harm. He had seen fear like this before, in horses after long chases, in wounded men after battle. Fear that came not from a single moment, but from days or years of running. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "You need rest." The words were plain, without demand. Naya's gaze flicked to the door. It wasn't locked. That eased her tension by a fraction, though her fingers stayed tight where they clutched the blanket. Cole moved to the stove, choosing each motion with care, so he wouldn't startle her. He lifted the lid slightly, checked the embers, and added a small piece of wood. The new flame brightened the room, casting a warm glow on the walls. He reached for the kettle, filled it from the water bucket, and set it on the stove without letting the metal clatter. Every movement had a gentleness that felt deliberate. When he knelt to reach a clean cloth from the shelf, her breath hitched. He froze for a moment, just long enough to show he had heard her, and slowly stood back up before bringing the cloth near her. But he didn't touch her. He set the cloth in a bowl of water on the small table beside the bed, within reach but not forced upon her. She watched every step he took, trying to understand him. He had stopped the crowd. He had carried her gently. Now he kept distance. Her thoughts trembled between suspicion and the first small flicker of relief. Cole hung his coat on the hook by the door, rubbing the cold from his hands before kneeling near his supplies. He placed a few canned goods on the table, then filled a pot with broth from a jar he had prepared days earlier. The scent rose quickly, warm, simple, welcoming. He stirred it slowly, his face lit by the stove's glow, his expression calm but focused. He rarely looked in her direction, sensing how easily she flinched under direct attention. When the broth warmed, he poured a small amount into a tin cup and set it on the table close to her, but not so close that she felt cornered. "Eat if you can," he said, voice steady. She didn't move at first. Hunger gnawed at her, but fear pressed harder. She waited until he stepped away, until his boots sounded near the opposite wall, where he began organizing his supplies, giving her space. Only then did she reach out slowly, her fingers trembling as they closed around the cup. The warmth surprised her. It steadied her breath enough for her to take a small sip. Her throat burned slightly from dryness, but the taste eased something deep in her chest. Cole noticed, though he didn't turn fully. That small sound, a quiet swallow, told him she was at least willing to trust the food. When she finished half the cup, she lowered it carefully. Her hands loosened a little, the tension in her shoulders lowering by one small degree. Cole took a blanket from the shelf and brought it closer, stopping again when her eyes widened. He lowered the blanket onto the bed without touching her, then stepped back to the other side of the cabin. "You take the bed," he said simply. "I'll stay by the stove." His tone carried no negotiation, no suggestion of an exchange. It was a fact, spoken as plainly as stating the temperature outside. Naya watched as he lay down near the stove, still wearing his boots, using his rolled-up coat as a pillow. He didn't face her. He didn't make a sound beyond the quiet settling of his body on the wooden floor. He was exhausted from the day, but he didn't let sleep take him yet. He listened to her breathing, to the shift of blankets, to the small sounds that would tell him if she was afraid or trying to escape. Not because he wanted control, but because he wanted to be aware if she needed something or if danger came near. Naya lay stiff on the bed for a long time, eyes fixed on the beams of the ceiling. She expected him to get up, to change his mind, to move closer. But he didn't. He stayed on the floor near the stove, one arm over his chest, eyes closed, but his posture calm. The distance he kept confused her. She had met men who gave kindness only to demand something later. She didn't know what he wanted, but the longer she watched him, the more her heartbeat slowed. His breathing remained steady. His body didn't shift toward her. If anything, he seemed to be trying to make himself as unthreatening as a large, tired man could be. For the first time in days, the fear pressing against her ribs eased enough for her to shut her eyes. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin walls. Inside, the stove kept the air warm. And two strangers, one terrified, one worn down by life, lay in the same small room, separated by several feet of wooden floor and by every past wound they both carried, yet held together by the simple fact that neither had turned away. Morning came slowly, with a thin gray light filtering through the small window above the table. The cabin felt still, almost suspended, the warmth from the stove holding the night's cold at bay. Naya opened her eyes before she moved, the way a person did when they weren't certain of their surroundings. For a few seconds she didn't breathe at all, her thoughts snapping back to the last place she remembered, the street, the stones, the crowd. But then she heard the faint scrape of wood outside, a steady rhythm, slow and deliberate. The sound grounded her. She turned her head slightly and saw the empty floor where Cole had slept. The blanket he used was folded neatly, already put away. Nothing in the cabin was disturbed. Nothing had changed while she slept. She eased herself up on her elbows. The blanket he'd left for her was still over her legs, warm from her body heat. She looked around again. Everything was exactly as it had been. Tools arranged carefully on the wall, boots by the door, the stove glowing quietly, the table empty except for the tin cup she hadn't finished. Her body hurt from the bruises and from days of walking, but the pain felt duller this morning. Her stomach tightened with hunger, but she hesitated before reaching for anything. This wasn't her home. She didn't know the rules here. Outside, Cole split wood with the kind of steady strength that came from years of repetitive work rather than force. His axe rose and fell in a slow rhythm. Not rushed, not aggressive. Just purposeful. She listened for a while, letting the sound tell her that he was not inside watching her, that she had space to figure out her next move. Eventually, hunger pushed her to rise. She slipped off the bed carefully and tested her balance. Her legs shook at first. She steadied herself by pressing her palm lightly against the wall. She crossed the room in small steps and reached the stove. The pot still held a little broth, now cold but edible. She lifted the lid, checked it, then set it back quietly. She found a cup on the shelf and poured a small amount, aware she should not take more than necessary. The broth tasted different cold, but warmed her stomach nonetheless. She held the cup with both hands, her fingers stiff from tension. The door opened. She stiffened instantly, cup trembling slightly. Cole stepped inside with an armful of wood, his boots leaving faint dirt prints on the floorboards. Cold air followed him, filling the cabin briefly before he shut the door with a slow, controlled motion. He paused when he saw her standing. Not an alarm, just taking the scene. Her posture, her hands, the cup, the distance she kept between them. "You're up," he said quietly. His voice was deep from the cold, steady, without any sharp edge. She nodded once. Words still felt unsafe. Cole moved to set the wood near the stove. He didn't come close to her. He kept several feet of space between them, placing each log down in a neat stack before straightening. He brushed the dirt from his gloves and looked toward the window, not directly at her. "You can take what you need to eat," he said. "There's more in the cupboard." Her eyes followed his gesture. The cupboard stood open enough that she could see canned vegetables and a few jars. She hesitated before nodding again. The idea of taking anything from him, even with permission, made her uneasy. But hunger had a stronger voice. Cole stepped to the window and adjusted the latch that had loosened overnight. He worked quietly, with the same precision she had seen yesterday. Every movement had intention. He didn't waste steps. He didn't fidget. He seemed like a man who had learned to conserve everything: food, tools, words. While he worked, she cleaned the cup she used, wiping it carefully with a cloth and placing it back exactly where she found it. The gesture came from habit. She had survived many places by not leaving traces or inconveniencing anyone. Cole noticed but didn't comment. Instead, he crouched to check the stove's ash pan, then stood again, dusting off his hands. Only then did he speak, keeping his tone low. "You can rest today. No one will come out this far." His words were meant to reassure, but she still checked the door again, her shoulders tight. She didn't believe safety could last more than a few hours. Cole stepped toward the stool near the table, intending to sit, but stopped when he saw her inch backward automatically. He changed direction without a word and sat on the chair furthest from her instead. That small adjustment caught her off guard. He moved differently than the men she feared. He watched her reactions, not with judgment, but out of caution for her, not himself. She lifted the cup again, her hands more stable now. She drank slowly. Minutes passed in quiet, filled only by the soft crackling inside the stove and the faint whistle of wind outside. Neither spoke. They didn't need to, but something shifted in the silence. It wasn't the thick fear from last night. It was a quieter space, where neither intruded and neither was forced to retreat too far. Cole finally